Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Politically Depressed. As always, I'm your host, Ayman McAdam. So yesterday I had a bit of a crash, emotionally. I don't know exactly what triggered it. I found myself in the kitchen, realizing that I'd forgotten to turn off the oven, and when I turned it off and opened it up to let out some of the heat, and put my hands to the heat, I became incredibly depressed. I felt sick to my stomach. I felt just horrible. My mind immediately went to Gaza. My mind went immediately to all those millions of people who are languishing in these tents that are being flooded, searching for any little piece of shelter or warmth. And as my hands were being warmed by the warmth of the oven, I cried. And it was just a lot of things coming up all at once. For the last 50 days since the ceasefire in Lebanon, and then with the, incredible developments in Syria, alongside my, own work on my video essay, I've been a little bit distracted, or rather, my focus has been elsewhere. I never stopped thinking about Gaza. I never stopped paying attention. But I definitely know that there was some emotional distance that I didn't have before. And much like when I find myself not thinking about death for too long, suddenly it comes back. And I'm like, oh, it is going to happen. Just because I wasn't thinking about it or focusing on it, that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And I don't know. I got incredibly low. I laid down. I cried a bit more. And was really just unable to do anything, so I sort of passed out. Which is kind of what I tend to do when, I can't handle certain emotions. And so here I am at 6 a.m., having woken up. Also from a very depressive dream, which I won't talk about too much because I don't remember too much. But there was definitely, as always, it was set in Beirut. This time focused on a lot of the destruction that I have yet to see. But it was definitely a dream influenced by how I was feeling. There is specifically one scene actually in the dream wherein I'm in my brother's room and the window comes off and I'm trying to put it back in, but I'm afraid that it'll fall out, out the window literally. And, part of it was impotency, was an inability to fix something. And so basically, I just figured I'd sit with these emotions and share them with you all and go through them. Because I definitely think a lot of us have clocked out. Because staying too plugged in felt self-destructive. Because a lot of what I've been talking about, a lot of what I know a lot of people have been doing is staying emotionally checked in. And allowing that to kind of motivate us, push us in certain directions to make change, to do something, to call for change. And finding that was, incredibly fruitless. And so I think there is like a burnout, there is a despair. And so there's a sort of salvaging of ourselves. But there really is no salvaging ourselves without Gaza. And so... yeah, I'm going to talk a lot about some of the things I've been thinking about vis-a-vis that, and I don't know. Before I start, and again, it still feels weird to do certain whatever, but it's necessary because fuck it. This podcast is supported by you, and we really need your help. So if you're listening to this podcast and you enjoy the work or appreciate the work that I do and a lot of us do at From the Periphery, please consider becoming a member of our Patreon. You help support this work, which would not exist without you. You also get access to a lot of cool stuff like my sub-series Keep This Between Us and the invitation to our monthly hangout, which is going to happen in a few days actually, on Saturday. But regardless, would really appreciate it, and you help make this continue. You know, you help continue this project and whatever. Anyway, so I've titled this episode Existentialism in the Age of Genocide because in many ways, existentialism was my first foray into, I don't know, a lot of the stuff that I talk about now, I guess. A lot of my political focus, but also my connection with the emotional aspects of it all, but also the philosophical aspects. There is this thing that I've always held very close to my heart, which is that we are going to die. As I've said before, I've never believed in a god. I was raised in a functionally atheist household and only ever really believed in hell, and that I blame on my Christian and Muslim friends. But functionally, I've always known that there is no inherent meaning to life and that we have to construct our own. And here, Albert Camus, as problematic and shitty as he is, his sort of answer to the question of the absurd, which is that dissonance between our desire for meaning and the lack of meaning in this world. I find his answer to be the most helpful, which is, fuck it, just do it anyway. You know, we must imagine Sisyphus happy, as in, accept the situation, accept the fact that there is no inherent meaning, and so we have to construct it. And in the book Myth of Sisyphus, he talks about suicide as the only serious philosophical question. And I am going to talk a little bit about suicide. And so, like, trigger warning for anybody. I mean, it's totally fine. I honestly, myself, cannot talk about it too much. I've had friends talk to me and I tell them, like, listen, I'm really, really, really sorry. I really want to be here for you. But it is difficult. And I find it very funny, actually, because I talked about it a little bit with my therapist, with my new therapist, and she was like, oh, go to a psychiatrist, like, right now. Like, you need to check up on your medication. And I'm like, why? And she was like, well, you're talking about suicide. I'm like, no. Because, like, I don't know. I'm definitely not at the place or contemplating or anything. But it is something that always exists in the back of my mind. Not as this sort of, like, urgent escape something or like but like as a rational option to avoid, or almost like as an exit plan, essentially. Like, if things get too bad, there's always that option, which has always felt a bit like reassuring to me in a weird way. But so when Camus says that it's the only serious philosophical question, it is connected to this fact that there is no inherent meaning, there's no sin, it's not like you're going to go to hell, but like that if there is no meaning, if it is all just suffering and bullshit and whatever, so why not just kill oneself? And I think that's taken on a whole new meaning today, in the age of collapse, in the age of genocide, which, again, is like more than a one-off. It is not just what the Israelis, what the Zionists are doing to Palestinians in Gaza. But I think it does constitute a kind of imperialist revolution of method, of what is possible, what is acceptable. And it's not the only genocide that's currently happening. It is the genocide gaining the most attention. It is the genocide that is, like, most heavily and, like, disgustingly backed by the world's foremost powers. But There are genocides happening across the board in Tigray, in Ethiopia, in the Xinjiang region, in China, of Armenians by Azerbaijan. Honestly, there's just a number of them, and it's horrifying. In Sudan, many describe what Bashar al-Assad did in Syria as a genocide, not just like, ISIS and the Yazidis, but like specifically of Sunni Muslims, because it was like a cleansing campaign. But so basically, I don't know, like, I remember reading once that Hitler and the Nazis, saw the First World War as a revolution in the methods of warfare, of mobilizing people and resources towards destruction, death, domination. And I'm seeing kind of similar things happening now with this kind of almost euphoria at what Israel is doing. I found myself the other day reading an article in research for this video essay, and about, 10 sentences in, there's something that was a bit of a red flag, and I was like, wait, what? And I kept reading, and I discovered it's a website, I think it's like a Middle East Forum or something, the Journal for Middle East Studies or something, intensely Zionist. Like, first I was like, oh, this is pretty anti-Palestinian. But then I discovered that the whole platform is disgusting. And they have a whole page called the Israel Victory channel. And all these statistics of the accomplishments of the Israelis. And, it's not just this battle between like a small group of Israelis, of Zionists, of the Israeli government, versus obviously the Palestinians, but also against like anti-genocide protesters and organizers around the world, with their kind of, I don't know, going along with it governments. Like, no, this is an active campaign, and the manifestations of it are everywhere. And states are seeing this and realizing, oh, we can do the same. This is acceptable. That there is no, like, serious or, like, risky for us pushback. And so I see that obviously is connected with a lot of the collapses. We are very much living in a time of capitalist collapse, of climate collapse, wherein those imperialist powers, those states, are going to see benefits in this ability to kill undesirables, to do horrific actions, to prevent people from coming onto their shores, to prevent people from rising up, to, I don't know. It's honestly really horrible. Trump is coming in, and God knows what that's going to look like. But we've already experienced 2 years of the alternative, kind of, in terms of American, like, political, electoral politics. And it's unacceptable. And there is no serious third option. There is no revolution on the rise. There is no, third party or whatever, which I never really believed in. Again, honestly, and this is just me being a little petty now, but where the fuck is Jill Stein? Like, I never really followed up with her, but, like, one of the main critiques of any of these third parties is, like, they show up, like, 5 months before the election and are not serious in building people power, which requires consistent whatever. And as far as I can see, again, I could be wrong because I just don't follow, and she could still be doing her tweets and her Instagram stuff, but whatever. That's just me being really petty. But so what I find myself doing is just kind of avoiding everybody. I talk to my family, I talk to my friends, I'm online, I'm doing all this stuff. But I very much so, it wasn't even a decision, it was just very instant. Like, I didn't have to think about it. I did not go to Christmas with my partner to be with their family, because I just cannot handle it. I cannot handle the normalcy, the faux normalcy, this essentially like imperialist core, imperialist center normalcy, it would drive me mad. I mean, it already is. And that's why I don't really leave the house much, because it is just knowing what's happening and knowing what needs to happen and knowing what's coming. Leaving the house and seeing people just go about their days. And again, in Europe, in a city like Vienna, surrounded by white people, very much so relatively at a global scale, like well off or at least comfortable, not doing enough, not doing more, not being engaged. Not even not being engaged for Palestine, but for themselves, for regional politics, for Ukraine, for their own whatever. It's so fucking frustrating and genuinely drives me mad. Like again, I've said this time and time again, but khalas, I'm no longer sane. I can definitely tell and see the shift. And I'm tired of trying to explain it to people who aren't already in it. My partner, sometimes it's like, it's less so of not being able to empathize. But if they're not feeling it too, then I just feel more isolated. Like having to explain, or feeling like I'm in the position. I don't know how to explain this. Fuck me. I just think all of us should feel a deep sense of shame for being unable to stop what is happening in Palestine, in Lebanon, in Sudan, in so many contexts, but specifically in Palestine, where it is these governments, it is their states, it is all of our states who are not doing enough, who, if anything, in many cases across Europe, are supporting it still. And if you don't carry around that shame, if you don't have that awareness of your failures, of your lacking, of the fact that you are not doing enough, that there is stuff you can be doing, that you're not doing, even if it's because, you have reasons. Like, I think a lot of us that have tried to do stuff are being pushed to reckon with the fact that there is nothing institutional we can do. There is nothing that is acceptable to the structures of power we live under that would meaningfully change the situation. That doing anything meaningful means taking incredible amounts of risk. And for a lot of us, that's a risk that we cannot take. That are already precarious or something. But even still, I think that shame, I think that recognition still needs to exist. I saw a video yesterday of a man in Syria breaking down. It's filmed from inside a car, and the car had two people who were coming from Idlib. Idlib, which, for those that don't know, for the last 5 years had been besieged by Syria, by the regime, by Iran, and by Russia. And they were the last sort of pocket to hold out. And it was from Idlib that the initial military operation that eventually led to the downfall of Assad started. And so this video from inside the car showed a man from outside holding the driver, crying, and telling him, "I'm so sorry. Would you please, God, forgive us. We left you. We left you in Idlib. I promise you, we never stopped thinking about you." And this is a person inside Syria, in Homs. And this is that extreme situation where they could not do anything to support their brothers and sisters and siblings in Idlib. And so I think a lot of us need to have that. That's like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think anymore. I can't. I don't care about the liberal, about the socialist, about the these sort of political tendencies. I need to know where your heart is. Like, do you feel that sense of failure, of defeat, of shame? And if not, I just cannot relate. And I don't want to relate. I don't want to engage. To go back to what I was talking about at the very beginning about suicide, I'm definitely not at the place at all of thinking or considering or contemplating. But I think it's something to talk about. Because for me, honestly, part of my complex with death is the fact that it is such a taboo. That, I mean, especially us younger folk, like every time I talk about death, people are like, can we change the subject? And I'm like, no, I mean, it's a thing that's going to happen to all of us. Why don't we talk about it? Like, you know what I mean? It's a thing that, it's that elephant in the room wherever you go. And so the fact that it's not talked about makes it feel even more I want to talk about it, or rather that it makes it feel more intense. And same goes for suicide, if not even more, because I think people are comfortable with this idea of death being something that's going to happen but we can't control. And so then when you talk about suicide, then it's this thing of wait, that's fucked up because you are controlling the thing that's meant to be uncontrollable. But I don't know, basically the way I think about it is in this way. Again, I'm sorry, trigger warning for anybody. Completely understand if people want to clock out and skip ahead. But it's that when I find myself in these depressive moments, kind of clocking into reality, feeling this pain and this disgust, and knowing that it's not going to get better, that eventually it will get so bad that death will be desirable. And so then it's like an escape. It's great. Why not? But the only way to kind of escape that thinking, and again, the reason that I think about this and talk about this is not just as a sort of philosophical experiment or whatever, but as almost like a political practice. I want to avoid this because obviously I think politically, for the most part, suicide is not a helpful tactic. Sorry, that's really fucking dark. The point is that I want to resist these constantly, that sort of conclusion, and constantly try and find the meaning that I could place onto staying here and continuing. What is the work that makes it worthwhile, that makes the pain and the misery and the suffering that I may experience sort of contextualized within a bigger project, a bigger goal. At the moment, I am lacking that meaning. I have it a little bit. I think I've attributed it a bit to the video essay, a bit to this media work I'm doing, a bit to other works I'm doing. Because without that meaning, I can't think of anything else, Without that meaning, I think it's all kind of useless and even more insufferable. And I don't know. I just think it's honestly just so horrible what has kind of become normal, what has become kind of background. The images, the scenes, the descriptions, the voices of anguish and pain that we hear from Ghazins. I don't know. It's really horrible, and it's the closest thing that I've ever been able to attribute to myself as a purpose for my life is alleviating suffering of those around me. And here, obviously, when we talk about Gaza, we're talking about at a global scale. I mean, me personally at a kind of regional scale, but still. And I just feel like sometimes I can't even do that. But again, none of us really can. And we only really can in collaboration with each other, in movements, in groups, in collectives. Actually, for some reason, when I woke up I found myself thinking about a song that I haven't listened to in a very long time. It's Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto. It's one of my favorite pieces of music, and I found myself over the years listening to it whenever I want to cry, specifically when someone dies. And I think there's something about it with the sort of conflict between the lone violin and the orchestra, and the kind of futility of the single violin to trump the the orchestra. The best it can do is to have the orchestra play along, play the same tune, but it still overtakes it. But there's just something so painful about. I mean, I'm not very good with music. I don't know, but there's something about the solo that sounds a bit broken. It sounds like it's hitting these like off notes, and I think it is that imperfect attempts at individuality, at like sort of making your voice heard amongst the sort of I don't know, cacophony of the orchestra, of history, of the world, of society. It's beautiful. Honestly, I don't know, listen to it. If for nothing else, just like the first movement. But I identify with that soloist, and I think that's the point. And I don't know, maybe I can learn from the soloist to keep on going regardless. Um, Even if you're breaking, even with these like off notes, to just keep playing. I don't know. Is that a conclusion? I think it might be. I did not expect that to happen. I'm always pleased with myself when I find like I've actually made a sort of point, especially towards the end, because obviously with a lot of the stuff I've been thinking about and talking about, there's no real conclusions. Any of the conclusions have been things that I've been saying over and over and over again, but I mean, and that's fine, I guess, because, yeah. But things are really, really, really fucked. And, I don't know. I don't know. Learn from the soloist. Maybe I'll listen to it again and think if that actually does work, if that makes sense, or if that sort of feeds and nourishes my capacity to continue. And I mean, it's fine. Listen, like it's that kind of thing of why I connected what I experienced yesterday to what I experience vis-a-vis death is because sometimes I find myself at months not thinking about death, and then when it hits me, it's that thing of like, holy shit, I could have died at any point, and I haven't been thinking about it. I haven't figured it out. I don't have a plan. I haven't like emotionally resolved myself to accept or whatever, which obviously is like a ridiculous idea because nobody really ever can. Or I mean, some can and they're like zen as fuck. But so here yesterday, there was that kind of moment of like, fuck, I have not engaged emotionally in any of this. And it's just sort of like a wave, And I don't know. I really don't know. I don't want to make this too personal as well or like too focused on the individual. I do constantly want to be talking about things towards building, towards thinking about organizing and connecting. And I really appreciate all the messages I've been receiving in the last few days about how the things I've been talking about have kind of connected with people and how I've helped people through the last year understand what they're going through, the situations that are happening, a lot of stuff. And so I love that. And I hope that's manifesting further and further. that there are other people, that it's not just me and this one other person, you know what I mean? That it's like you, the listener, and me, but that it's helping create between you and others, maybe like a politically depressed listening group. That'd be funny. You all listen to the episode and then talk to each other. God, I'm turning into such a egomaniac. Anyway, so yeah. Existentialism in the age of genocide. Definitely another thing that I'm going to be thinking about. And constantly, I mean, again, been talking about this. I'm just going to wrap it up there because I know I'm rambling. So yeah, that's been another episode of Politically Depressed. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, or at least appreciate it. If you have, please consider supporting this podcast. There are a number of ways you can do so. The easiest way is to leave a rating wherever you're listening to this podcast. If you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. If you're on Spotify, leave a 5-star rating. Same with Apple Podcast. More than that, you can support this podcast financially by becoming a member of our Patreon or leaving a tip in the tip jar below. Beyond that, tell your friends, tell your family, help spread the word. Really appreciate it, and yeah, love and appreciate you all, and I'll see you all next time.